The day he fired me, it was 4:55 p.m., fluorescent lights humming, half the office already packing up. Bryce called me into the glass room with the door that never fully shut so everyone could see. He smiled like a dentist. Bad attitude, poor fit, effective immediately. I thought he was joking. I had just saved a rollout that morning by flagging a shipment error that would have stalled 2 clinics. I said, "Is this because of the safety email?" He slid the paper forward. "This is about culture." HR sat beside him, staring at a stapler. I didn't cry. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I signed for my laptop handoff and walked past 30 people who suddenly loved their screens. Someone coughed. A chair squeaked. In the elevator, my phone buzzed, a calendar reminder I'd created weeks ago, final prep for Monday's pitch to High Plains Health, the hospital network Bryce had been chasing for a year. The thing I led. I watched our lobby shrink through the elevator's glass, anger burning behind my ribs. I texted no one, said nothing, and shoved my badge into my coat pocket. As the doors opened to the cold, a message from a junior teammate, Mia. "They're still pitching Monday, without you." I didn't go home. I walked 5 blocks under that winter sky to a coffee shop where the barista already knew my name, and I opened my phone like a crime scene. I reread my morning email, the one he'd twisted into negativity. It was calm, factual, patient safety first. I'd CC'd procurement, operations, and Bryce himself. I pointed out mislabeled pallets and a vendor barcode mismatch that would have routed devices to the wrong clinics. No flame, no sarcasm, just, "Here's the issue, here's the fix, here, the impact if we ignore it." At noon, procurement wrote back, "Thanks, good catch," and I exhaled. By 3, Bryce told me to stop stirring. By 5, I was terminated for attitude. I stared at the screen, pulse in my mouth, then scrolled further. A hospital liaison had replied privately, "Appreciate your diligence." I saved that message like a lighthouse. My phone buzzed again, "Mia. Compliance logged your note as potential risk." He saw it. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. The barista slid me a free muffin. "Tough day." "Ending a job," I said, not ending myself, not what I believe about work, about people. I was not going to let arrogance dictate my worth. On the walk back to collect my things, everything felt louder. Keyboards clacked. The printer coughed out 100 useless pages. No one made eye contact. I packed my framed photo, my planner, and the sticky note taped under my monitor, a quote I wrote the day I got promoted. "Do it right or don't do it." Nate, our best engineer, hovered at the edge of my cubicle and cleared his throat. "I'll say it out loud, you didn't deserve this." He handed me a folded paper. It was a handwritten thank you from a clinic manager, praising our team after a tough install last fall. I swallowed hard and nodded. As I zipped my tote, Olivia, our operations lead and quietly the spine of every timeline, stepped close. "If you build something, call me." She said it without drama, like she was scheduling a meeting. I didn't promise anything. Promises feel heavy when your badge is deactivated, but I slipped the clinic note into my wallet. When I reached the elevator, Mia mouthed, "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be." The doors slid shut on all that silence. Outside, the air smelled like snow. I dialed my dad, and when he answered, I said, "I think I'm going to build a company." I opened my laptop on my kitchen table and registered an LLC before the kettle boiled. No secret files, no stolen anything. I named it Northline Projects, straight, simple, clean. I built a spreadsheet of public RFP calendars, bookmarked procurement portals, and made a list of references who'd offered to speak for me without being asked. I set a rule for myself in bold at the top of the doc. Clean hands, clean work, no shortcuts. At midnight, Olivia texted, "I'm in when you're ready." Nate texted, "Moonlight until I can jump." I stared at those messages and felt my lungs expand. The next morning, the statewide RFP from High Plains Health went live. 4-week window, patient safety metrics front and center, schedule realism weighted heavily. My lane. I read every line twice, then brewed more coffee and wrote a 1-page plan for a phased rollout that matched nurse shift patterns and minimized downtime. No wizardry, no gloss, just clear steps and contingencies. At noon, my phone flashed a smirk from Bryce on LinkedIn, announcing excited for Monday's pitch. I shut the app. If I won anything, it would be because I did the work in daylight. And if I lost, I would lose clean. The pre-bid meeting was public, hosted in a city building with old wood benches and microphones that popped on consonants. I showed up in a plain blazer, hair pulled back, a notepad in hand. Representatives from 4 companies were there, including Bryce's. He wore an expensive coat and that grin that says he already owns the room. When they opened the floor for questions, I stood. On the inpatient wings, are we permitted to stagger in stalls after night shifts to protect recovery windows? The procurement officer perked up. We'd prefer it. I sat down, heart slapping my ribs but face composed. On the break, Bryce drifted close. Brave of you to play consultant now. I said nothing. He leaned in. You don't scale, Claire. My name sounded like a taunt in his mouth. This client wants a machine. I thought about the ICU beds, the nurses who skip lunch, the quiet way a monitor can become a prayer. They want reliability, I said. He laughed. Same thing. When the meeting resumed, I took notes like a librarian. On the way out, the procurement officer stopped me. Thank you for your question, clear and practical. My hands were steady when I turned the doorknob to leave. Week 1 was work like breathing. Mornings for research, afternoons for drafting, nights for refining. I built a risk register from public safety advisories, manufacturer bulletins, and hospital association best practices. Nothing behind a password I shouldn't touch. I color-coded by likelihood and impact, then wrote mitigation steps in human language. If an update fails, here. How we switch back without canceling surgeries. While I worked, Olivia shaped the schedule in a shared doc, aligning install windows with shift changes and meal breaks. Nate found a webinar hosted by the device vendor about optimal sequencing, public, recorded, free. We integrated it. On Friday, Mia called from her car. They're promising go live in half the time to make the board swoon. I pinched the bridge of my nose. That's when systems crack, she exhaled. I hate watching them do this. Do your job, I said gently. Don't get fired because of me. I hung up and wrote a single line on a sticky note. Under promise, over deliver, protect patients. Then I added a second line. Tell the truth plainly. I taped it to my monitor, took a breath, and opened the blank page for the budget. Numbers don't lie when you let them speak. I built an open book budget using vendor quotes, standard labor rates, and contingencies labeled in plain English. Every variable had a source. Every assumption was conservative. I emailed 3 references who had already offered to speak on my behalf and asked for brief letters about working with me. No scripts, no pressure. By afternoon, the first letter arrived from a rural hospital I supported last year. Claire delayed launch to fix a safety flag, saved us money and grief. I stopped and let that sentence wash through me. That night, Olivia sent me a screenshot. Bryce's recruiter had messaged her with a counteroffer if she'd return. Olivia replied with a single line. No, thank you. I copied her reply into our internal doc titled Decisions We're Proud of. On Saturday morning, I reread the RFP scoring rubric. Cost transparency mattered, but reliability mattered more. I tweaked the budget to make trade-offs explicit. If we compress timelines, costs rise and risk rises. If we pace it, we lock in stability. I chose stability. It felt like leaving a note for my future self. This is who we are. A city tech committee hearing popped up on the public calendar, reviewing a past municipal project that Bryce's firm delivered. I went, sat in the back, and listened. The audit summary didn't accuse anyone of crimes. It simply noted a pattern. Aggressive timelines caused rework, increasing total downtime. I wrote those words exactly, then wrote lesson learned beside them. After the hearing, Bryce saw me near the coat rack. Stalker much? His voice was low, eyes amused. It's a public meeting, I said. He shrugged. You could have had a nice, quiet exit with severance. I looked him in the eye. You fired the person who told the truth. He smirked. I fired a vibe. The word felt like gum stuck to a shoe. Outside, the wind pushed grit along the sidewalk. I tucked the audit summary into my folder and walked to the bus stop. A stranger rubbed their hands and said, cold. It'll pass, I said. What I didn't say, bruises fade, but clarity endures. That night, I added one slide to our proposal called, What Overpromising Costs? It was 3 bullet points and 1 sentence. We prefer low drama and high performance. On Monday, procurement scheduled vendor briefings, short, structured calls to clarify questions. When my slot came, I answered calmly. Yes, our plan staggers installs around night shift recoveries. Yes, cost contingencies are baked in. No, we won't need after-hours stunts to impress anyone. I heard a small laugh from someone on the other end. After the call, Mia texted. They're planning a trial install at a clinic without telling procurement, just to show speed. I stared at the message, heart sinking. It wasn't illegal, but it bent rules that exist for a reason. I didn't want to be the tattletale who sounded obsessed. I also didn't want a clinic to bear the weight of someone's pitch theater. I dialed the procurement office and left a neutral voicemail, clarifying whether unscheduled demonstrations are permitted during the RFP process. If prohibited, could you reissue guidance to all bidders? I hung up and sat very still. 10 minutes later, a memo went out to everyone. No off-plan activities allowed. I didn't cheer. I poured coffee and returned to the document, writing the section title, When Things Go Sideways, We Don't. Halfway through the second week, I crashed. Not my laptop, me. My pitch rehearsal sounded like a fast-forwarded podcast. Olivia stopped me mid-sentence. "Breathe," she said. "You're selling safety and sanity, not fireworks." We scrapped the wall of charts and replaced them with 2 clean diagrams and 3 short stories from the field. No names, just what it feels like when the on-call pager never rests. Nate reminded me of a trick from his dad, a carpenter. Do the measuring in daylight and the cutting when you're calm. We set a hard stop at 9 and went for a walk in the cold. The city felt like a giant exhale. When we came back, I wrote a page titled If Vendor Goes Bankrupt. It showed data escrow, rehosting steps, and a handover plan any hospital could execute without us. It wasn't flashy. It was grown-up. As I shut my laptop, my phone lit up, a nurse manager from a pilot site. "Your staggered plan means we don't cancel surgeries. That's the point, right?" I texted back. "That's the point." It felt like stepping into a room where I could finally hear myself think. The pitch day came with icy sidewalks and nerves that tasted like copper. We arrived early and sat in a quiet hallway where the walls were lined with photos of former city leaders. Bryce's team swept in like a commercial, voices bright, shoes loud. I opened my notebook to a blank page and drew 3 boxes: patient, nurse, tech. I wrote a single question over them. Who carries the consequence? In the conference room, the board sat with notepads. The procurement officer smiled politely. I opened with a story about an ICU bed waiting for a system that must not freeze. I laid out our phases, our failbacks, our packing. When someone asked, "Can you prove reliability?" I referenced the public audit summary about overpromising causing rework. No company names, just the lesson. I said, "Our approach is boring in the best ways." A board member scribbled something and nodded. When the bell rang to end the slot, I felt like I'd finally stopped apologizing for being careful. Outside, as we packed our bags, I heard Bryce hiss at a junior teammate, blaming them for a mislabeled chart. It sounded like my firing day. I met Olivia's eyes. We kept walking. Finalists would be announced the next morning, and procurement added a 2-hour risk and continuity Q&A for whoever made the cut. We were ready, but I still didn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about every time I'd made a trade-off under pressure. My mistakes weren't sins. They were lessons written in red pen. At 4 a.m., I made tea and reread our escrow plan. I imagined the board chair's face when I asked to show it. Would it look like I was inviting disaster? Or would it read as realism, the kind people trust when stakes are human? By 9, the email arrived. 2 finalists, Bryce's firm and Northline. I closed my eyes and inhaled. Then I called my dad. "We made the cut." He said, "Do what you do, build a table that won't wobble." I laughed. My dad fixes things, invents shelves from nowhere. The Q&A was set for afternoon. Olivia suggested we eat first. We did slowly, like people who know that hunger makes you snap and softness makes you strong. I brought index cards and wrote questions the board hadn't asked yet, the ones an exhausted night nurse would ask at 2 in the morning. The Q&A began with the usual: staffing, holidays, backfill. When it was my turn, I said, "I have 1 slide to share if permitted." The chair nodded. I put up the contingency plan labeled "If Vendor Disappears." No drama, just escrow, data format, hosting options, legal contacts, and a step-by-step path that would work even if we got hit by a bus. The room shifted. The consultant Bryce hired, a name people drop at conferences, cleared his throat and asked, lightly mocking, "Isn't that a bit pessimistic?" I smiled. "It's respectful. These systems are life support for operational work. We plan for weather." A board member leaned forward. "Thank you." Nate answered a question about device pairings and language so plain a 12-year-old could follow. Olivia explained our staffing in weeks, not buzzwords. Bryce's team promised speed again, prettier reports, fewer meetings. A physician on the board said, "I don't care about pretty." 2 hours later, we were asked to wait outside. We sat in the hall, hands folded, back straight. Waiting can feel like punishment. That day, it felt like integrity taking up space. Award day was a public meeting streamed online, which meant anyone could watch, from nurses in break rooms to Bryce's managing partners. I wore the same plain blazer, hair twisted back. Bryce sat 2 rows behind me, legs crossed, jaw set. The chair summarized both proposals, one clear, measured, and grounded, one ambitious and glossy. Then the chair said, "We favored verifiable reliability over aspirational timelines." The vote wasn't close. Northline won. The room clapped politely because government meetings don't do standing ovations. I felt something unspool in my chest, like a knot finally learning to be a ribbon. I shook hands, signed nothing yet, and thanked the staff. As the room emptied, Bryce didn't bolt. He approached the aisle slowly, like someone circling a pool they're about to fall into. He said my name soft, like he'd always been gentle. "Claire," I waited. "We should talk," he said. "I have another project. We could use your steadiness." I looked at the ceiling briefly, just to find a neutral sky. Then I said, "You should apologize to your team." His mouth twitched. "I'm serious." "So am I," said. We didn't celebrate that night with fireworks. We ordered pizza and opened cheap, sparkling water in my apartment. Olivia's laugh filled the kitchen. Nate told a story about bumping a server rack with his shoulder once and thinking he'd shut down a continent. Mia called to scream and then whispered because she was still in her car on their lot. "I'm giving notice tomorrow," she said. "Be sure," I said. "Don't jump because of adrenaline." "I want to work where telling the truth isn't a liability," she whispered. I looked at the sticky note on my fridge. "Tell the truth plainly." I said, "Okay, we'll have a place for you." After we hung up, I stood at the sink and let the water run over my hands. I wanted to dunk my head into a bowl of silence and hear only the hum of a clean server room. Olivia tapped her glass. "To the line we didn't cross." We clinked. The window rattled as a light train passed. I thought of the glass room at 4:55. I thought of Bryce's smirk in the hallway. I thought very calmly that cruelty is just fear wearing a tie. The contract signing took a week of red lines and calendar juggling. The hospital's legal team was thorough, and I loved them for it. We added clarity around maintenance windows and a shared incident playbook. We didn't twist anything. We didn't burrow into loopholes. Meanwhile, Bryce's partners, according to whispers that floated through town like pollen, were unhappy. Speed had lost to sanity, and their golden account had gone quiet. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. It was the nurse manager who'd messaged me earlier. "I filed an official comment in the portal about your staggered approach," she said. "You weren't the cheapest, but you felt safest." I said, "That means more than you know." After the call, I sat in the lobby of the hospital watching families speak in low voices, coats bundled on laps. A toddler ran in circles and fell, then popped back up laughing. Resilience looks silly often, then noble later. I texted Olivia. "After kickoff, we host a lunch for night shift folks. They're always last to be thanked." She replied with a thumbs up and a heart. Week after the award, Bryce asked for a private meeting. I chose a quiet table in a neutral cafe, open windows, no corners. He arrived with a folder and that same expensive coat. "Congratulations," he said, which sounded like he'd practiced it in the mirror. I said, "Thank you." He slid the folder halfway across. "There's a city hub project coming, bigger than the hospital work. We could subcontract Northline to steady our delivery." I didn't touch the folder. "You mean fix your promises?" He smiled without his eyes. "We'd pay well, you run the hard parts, we keep the relationship." I stared at him for a long beat. "When you fired me, you called integrity attitude." He shifted. "I called insubordination what it was." I flagged a safety risk. We both breathed. The cafe smelled like cinnamon. Finally, I said, "Apologize to your team. Stop breaking people to look strong." He flushed. "This is business. So is respect." I stood, left the folder on the table, and said, "Build what you can maintain." The doorbell jingled as I walked out. We held our kickoff in a bright conference room with a view of winter sunlight bouncing off the parking lot. I opened with rules. No heroics, no skipping meals, no blamming, and no hiding bad news. If we hurt ourselves, we hurt the work. Olivia walked the team through schedules in weeks, not miracles. Nate explained how we'd rehearse failures until they weren't scary. Mia, who joined us officially, showed the procurement folks her compliance checklist. Calm, thorough. exactly the kind of quiet excellence that never goes viral but keeps systems alive. Afterward, a surgeon stopped me in the hall. "You talked like the ore matters more than your timeline," I said. "It does," he smiled. "Good." We booked a modest celebration at a neighborhood bar for after the first milestone, not before. On my way out, I saw a familiar silhouette in the public seating area. Bryce. He wasn't in our room, he wasn't on the invite. He just sat, watching the bustle, the sense of forward motion he couldn't control. I didn't approach. I didn't gloat. I walked to my car, let the heater warm my hands, and played a quiet song. The first install weekend came with snowstorms threatening the mountain passes. We prepositioned gear and sent hot chocolate to the night shift nurses. Olivia ran the war room like a conductor, soft voice, clear cues. At 2 a.m., a small incident flared. An update refused to handshake with a legacy system. We executed the failback calmly, documented it, and tried again in the morning window when the ward was quieter. No ORs closed. No surgeries canceled. The next afternoon, procurement staffer came by with a box of donuts and a note. "We see you." I wanted to frame the note. We ate the donuts instead. By Monday, the system was humming, our inbox filled with short, practical thank yous. I printed them and taped them to a wall no client would ever see, the way parents stick report cards on fridges. At lunch, Mia slid me a photo, her desk at the old office empty now. "They've started exit interviews," she said. 2 senior engineers asked if we were hearing. "We are," I said, slowly, properly. It felt like planting bulbs under frost, trusting the math of seasons. My phone rang during a quiet afternoon, an unknown city number. The voice introduced themselves as part of the Digital Health Hub steering committee. "We're releasing a pre-solicitation soon. We'd value input at a public roundtable." I agreed, because I believe in rooms anyone can enter. The next day, a short article circulated about the upcoming hub. Bryce's partners were quoted, promising agile reinvention. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Reinvention is not a magic trick. It's repair, patience, and good checklists. At the round table, I said what I always say: schedule realism, nurse first windows, transparent contingencies. A community advocate asked who keeps vendors honest. "You do," I said, "with questions you repeat until answers make sense." After, a committee member pulled me aside. "You sound like someone who's been burned." "Or taught," I said. That night, I walked the icy path around my apartment complex and watched porch lights blink on. I thought about the elevator the day I left. I thought about how small the lobby looked from above. I thought about how people are never the size of their worst moment, unless they choose to be. Bryce called again. I let it go to voicemail. He texted, "My board wants a transitional advisor, big retainer." I typed and deleted 20 responses. Then I wrote, "Respect your people, start there." He didn't reply. Meanwhile, we hired one of those senior engineers, a woman named Tasha who built calm into every ticket she touched. On Friday, our team ate sandwiches on milk crates in a server room that hummed like a giant refrigerator. Nate said, "This is my church." We laughed, mouths full. Tasha told a story about how, at her old job, she once asked for a slower timeline and was told to think like a startup. She said, "I thought like a teacher instead." We toasted her with lukewarm ginger ale. Later, alone in my car, I listened to Bryce's voicemail. He sounded tired. He said, "Help me contain this." Not help me improve, not help me apologize. Contain. I pictured duct tape over a leak and knew I couldn't be part of that. I deleted the message and rolled down my window to let winter air slap my face awake. Mid-project, the hospital scheduled a public update with staff. We presented simple slides, 3 green checks, 1 yellow, 1 gray box labeled watch. No confetti. A nurse raised a hand. "What do you do when a patch fails?" I said. "We read the notes carefully, rehearse failure, and keep the lights on while we fix it." She nodded like someone finally answered the question without perfume. After the meeting, a small group lingered. One said, "We heard your old boss was here earlier." I said public buildings welcome everyone. They laughed, a gentle laugh, and someone added, "Karma is slow but punctual." On the way to the parking lot, snow started again, big flakes that make the world quieter. My phone buzzed with a message from my dad, a picture of a shelf he'd built in the garage, perfectly level. "Use a good stud finder," he wrote. I texted back a photo of our yellow box labeled watch. "We do," he replied, "proud of you." I sat in my car a long minute, watching the flakes melt against the windshield, thinking about how love is often just good advice repeated kindly. Award paperwork turned into purchase orders, then into ordinary Tuesdays. That's the secret about victories. Most of them are just rooms where people ask practical questions and write them down. Still, there were moments that felt like movies. One afternoon, procurement circulated an internal note praising plain-spoken reliability. Someone forwarded it to me with a smiley face. Another day, a resident physician stopped me to say, "I used to think vendors were all pitch and vanish. You're different." I thanked him and walked to the stairwell, where I let myself feel the heat in my eyes for 20 seconds and then got back to work. In the evenings, I noticed a subtle shift. Sleep came easier. I stopped replaying the glass room at 4:55. I started thinking about lunch for night shift again, about welcome kits for new hires that said, "We tell the truth plainly" on a card. When the city finally released the RFP for the Digital Health Hub, we downloaded it like everyone else. I didn't assume we'd win. I assumed the questions would be hard and that we'd answer honestly. That assumption had become my superstition, my way of keeping the lights modest and bright. Bryce's company didn't implode. Stories like mine don't always end with police tape and headlines. They kept operating, landing mid-sized contracts, losing some, winning others. But a quiet rumor spread. People didn't stay. Good staff rotated out like seasons. A friend from a partner agency told me Bryce's board had restructured, which is a corporate word for someone lost power. I spent 0 minutes gloating. I had hires to make and a maintenance window to review. We signed 2 more hospitals and kept the same pace. Careful, transparent, boring in the best way. One evening, the nurse manager from early on sent me a photo. A hallway with no crates, no frantic texting, just clear space. "Your plan made the nights boring," she wrote. "Bless you." I leaned my head against my cabinet and closed my eyes. Boring is often the most beautiful word in operations, in medicine, in life. I printed her message and taped it next to the note that said, "We see you." The wall was becoming a small museum of reasons. Reasons to keep saying no to shortcuts, yes to steady hands, yes to people over speed. The final walkthrough felt like returning to the building where I was humiliated, but now with a different gravity. Another glass room. Another late afternoon. Only this time I stood at the front with a group of nurses and techs, and we reviewed a checklist we had actually lived. I spoke calmly, not because I was suppressing rage, but because I didn't carry any. We'd done what we promised. We'd done it right. Through the window, in the public seating area, I noticed a familiar figure slip in. Bryce sat quietly, no entourage, no folder. He watched, expression unreadable. When the meeting ended, he didn't approach. He stood, adjusted his coat, and walked out. I turned to my team. "Any final questions?" A tech raised his hand. "What's our philosophy when the schedule and the patient disagree?" I smiled. "The patient wins." We packed up as the sun pinked the parking lot. I paused at the door and looked back at the whiteboard, now a map of work done well. I remembered the elevator doors closing on me months ago, the cold, the ache. It felt like a different life. On the way out, I said softly to myself, "We do it right or we don't do it." My voice didn't shake, it rang.